Hey, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Everything is Marketing podcast. My name is Eric Hultgren, and ahead of our cannabis event, Cannabis Insights, on March 11th, today we are talking to Andrew Dakki.
We get the struggles, from a compliance perspective.
And Matthew Abbo from the DA Advisory Group.
Once you get the license, like a golden ticket, you can do whatever you want. Take someone that knows nothing about the industry and kind of educate them and connect them with people that can help them.
We're going to be covering accounting in the cannabis space. As I said, my guests today are Andrew and Matthew. Guys, how are you this morning?
Good, Eric. Thank you for having us. How are you doing?
I'm awesome. It is my pleasure. I'm so excited to talk to you guys. As I said in the intro, you guys are best in class in this space. And so I want to start, Andrew, with how did you guys decide to go into this space? So you're a CPA firm that does the things that CPAs typically do, but then you have this other layer of expertise. And I'm just wondering, what were those conversations like? How did you step into the space and then become first in class in this industry?
Matt and I actually met at Ernst & Young. So we used to work at a Big Four accounting firm, and we were both in the audit group. And we kind of started there. And a lot of our clients, being in Michigan, were a lot of like manufacturing, auto, stuff like that, guys that have, inventory. And so Matt and I kind of both started our career there. And that's kind of what, was our base. We started at like the top of the top at UI. It's like, when someone's in college, that's where they want to go, right?
Yep.
And but we also have this huge network of like friends and family that have like small, medium-sized businesses, and they all asked us for help, but they were never something that we could do at UI. So Matt and I actually met on a job. We worked together, and we worked together for a little. We got along, and he came to me and said, "Hey, I had this small project, and do you want to help with it just for a friend?" And we did it. And it was like, oh, that was good. And then somebody else came to me, it was also a friend, and it was an attestation. That was like our first thing that we worked on in cannabis. So we did it, and I'm like, man, there's like a huge market for this. And one of Matt's really good friends one day was talking about it, and he said, hey, I'm going to start this operation in Oklahoma, actually. And Matt's like, oh, we can help you if you need it. And that was kind of our first taste of cannabis,
no pun intended, right?
No pun intended at all. But, we started working on that client in Oklahoma where the compliance was like, they had some things in place. It's not like Michigan, but that was kind of the first entryway into it, was that, that client. And, as time went on, we kind of started getting comfortable with what's important, because there's some, unique things that you need to do with like the normal accounting that you need to do in cannabis that, you wouldn't think about doing in like a normal, business that's, not subjected to ADE. But, after, we kind of got those first two clients, we just started expanding, meeting more and more people. And, finally, when we were decided to take our firm and, do it full time, we left our jobs and started getting into this. We just started to grow. Again, no pun intended on that one either, but
sure.
We started to grow and we kind of had that background with the manufacturing and, keeping track of inventory. A lot of these guys, they'll have that. Kind of having that knowledge is really important when you're approaching, clients that are in cannabis.
Well, and as new as this industry is in the United States, I imagine there's a ton of clients that come to you that really don't have a full grasp of what this is going to entail. Is that fair?
Yeah. It's kind of a mix. Some of them come and they have like a clear plan of like, hey, this is what I want to do. I want you guys to do, X, Y, and Z. And then some will come to us and say, hey, I want to get into the industry. I have, sort of a plan, but can you guys walk me through? Can you guys connect me with, attorney? How do I apply? What are my first steps with, with the application? What are my first steps when I'm actually operating? When do I call the CPA? Like, when do I need you guys? And usually I'm like, call me as soon as possible. But yeah, it's kind of a mix, and some people are already in it and they kind of took the path of using their, traditional CPA, some guy that was handling their other businesses. And, we get into it and we're like, okay, they were kind of on the right path, but there's some things that, might have been overlooked because that person was never exposed to the cannabis industry.
One of the things about the industry specific to Michigan, and obviously this will, as this rolls out across state by state, these will be a finite resource. So not everybody gets to be approved to do this. And so
yeah.
If you guys could sort of jump in, what sort of things should people be concerned about or understand are the pitfalls of opening a dispensary or anything in the cannabis space? And two, what sort of things can they do to put their best foot forward to make sure that they do get the things they need in order to open up?
Some pitfalls are, when people are getting into the industry, there's some things that they overlook. Um, a lot of it is driven by, financially, there's 280E, you're paying more taxes. Almost everything that you're doing is, every service that is being provided is a premium, almost like charged at a premium. Banking, not every bank is going to support cannabis right now. And, if you do find a bank that is, there's a handful of them that we work with and that we know, there's a premium on how much it costs. So a lot of times people are laying out their projections and, however much money they think they're going to make. And a lot of times, they overlook a lot of those things that, they wouldn't think about because they're just used to their normal business. So that's one we like to try to get in front of it and say, hey, just so you know, you guys can't deduct rent on your taxes or things like that. Like typically, there are ways, around it. That's where we come in and try to educate people on where are ways you can save and what are some things that you can do to kind of, mitigate some of those premiums that are a result of this industry. So, that's kind of where we come in and we try to add as much value as we can.
What people should know on of getting in the space. I don't think people really know what it takes. And I think it depends by state. Where you look at Oklahoma and, it costs $2,500 to obtain a license. So, getting the license is easy. It's easy to get into the space. But then it comes to the point where, it's saturated, every other corner, there's a dispensary, just like a Pizza Hut or something. And people open up shop, they don't know, what does it cost to get your inventory running? That costs money, the build out. And then, do people like your product? That's on the dispensary side. And then as far as growing, are you growing good product? Do you know how to grow? Do you know how to process? And do you have those resources to get a master extractor? So there's so many pieces that I think someone needs to sit down and say, hey, do I have this experience? And if I am inexperienced, where can I go? And there are a lot of resources. And Andrew and I have made many connections of people who, this is what their job is, to take someone that knows nothing about the industry and kind of educate them and connect them with people that can help them. And, that's what I think the most important thing is. And, as far as, like you said, some of these licenses, specifically in Michigan, it's like it's a special resource. And it's like, once you get the license, like a golden ticket, you can do whatever you want. And I think it depends on city by city. So some cities it's a raffle, everyone applies and whoever, they draw a name out of a hat, whoever gets it, they win the license. And then you have other cities where it's merit based. So, depending on, are you going to improve this plot of land? What value are you going to bring to our city? So then it's merit based. Then you got to think about, okay, what are the things that I need to do to win this license? And I think part of it is, someone that's already had this track record are potentially could be more favored than someone else. And so I think there's also that to consider. Someone that's starting off, that hasn't had any experience in the cannabis space, it's a little bit more tough. If you have investors, I think capital is a huge thing. And Andrew kind of touched on that is, do you have the capital? A lot of people, don't have $2-3 million they can just throw around. It takes a little bit more. It's finding those investors. And, Andrew, like Andrew mentioned also is, banking is a big issue. And so some of the things they don't want to give you a loan. So then the only option is to find an investor, to scrape up some money. And if the project goes south, then, all your money's gone. So I think there are a lot of things that need to be considered before jumping into the space. And then, there's also kind of the tax side of that. I think people have a misconception where normal business, you have your sales, your costs of the goods that you're selling, and then all your other operating expenses, like Andrew said, rent, utilities, repairs and maintenance, those types of things. Normal business could deduct those type of expenses, but because cannabis is still federally illegal, they call them below the line deductions. They're not available. So it's kind of, your sales minus the cost of the product gives you your gross profit. And that's what you get taxed on. All the other expenses that you incur are disallowed. So you could take a loss of $100,000 in a month or in a year. And but still, the IRS wants to tax you on $500,000 that you made in your gross profit. And so, that caused a lot of people to potentially go bankrupt. And I think that's the biggest risk. And you see that the most difficult for dispensaries because in accounting, it's what you buy your product for, that's what you sell it for. And that's your gross profit. Where if you're manufacturing, business where it's a cultivation facility or processing facility. It's a little bit different. You can do cost accounting, and that's kind of where Andrew said, like, where manufacturers, this is the type of accounting they do, where you capitalize, and that's taking some of your costs like rent, utilities, grabbing that, and then putting it into your inventory essentially, and then that way your cost of the goods is a little bit higher.
Yeah, those guys have a little more of an opportunity to, increase their cost of goods sold.
So, Andrew, let me ask you a question about how much time are you two working in this space? Because clearly, you know your stuff, right? You're recognized as one of the best in the country in this space doing what you guys do. How much day to day are you spending in the space? Because as Matthew was just rattling off those things, that feels like you're trying to do accounting while in quicksand and dodging lava balls, right? Like it's this dance where you're like, this rule is changing over here, this one's staying still, let's move over here. So what is it like day to day working in the space?
It's a lot of learning. I mean, honestly, even now, like, being in it for, as long as we have, there's still things that we like learn every single day. And, it's a lot of collaboration between us, and, other attorneys and other CPAs and our clients, coming, to a good understanding of what the processes are for each one of these operations and trying to find like, what's the best way to go about something. And a lot of researching, we do spend, a lot of the day researching, whether it's tax laws or just compliance, like, cause we have clients in Michigan, but we also have clients out of Michigan. Mm-hmm. So we're, constantly looking at, hey, what is the rule? What's changing? Like even for, in Michigan, for example, this just came up yesterday. Someone was asking us a question and they're doing an application and it was for the attestation, and part of the application, you need a CPA attestation on, your financial position. And, they threw out a number and Matt and I knew like the rules changed slightly and we're like, oh no, actually now it's only this. It just, that just comes with us just literally doing it every day and being in it every day, having constant conversations with like the MRA and, calling them like, hey, what are your guys' thoughts on this? And I think at this point, they're probably annoyed of us, but we appreciate them picking up the phone all the time. Some of their analysts, and they're great. It's an ever changing industry. So like, we get the struggles, from a compliance perspective, we're reaching out to them because, we reach out and sometimes they won't have the answers. And there's just so much to know. There's so much, there's so much information out there. And sometimes, it's just, you have to sit and really figure out what's the best answer.
And Director Brisboe once told me that this industry, specific to Michigan, moves very, very fast and very, very slow at the same time. Which makes it difficult to kind of navigate through because everything's changing and everything's sort of not going as fast as you want it to, right?
For sure.
So I want to ask you two guys, as we're sort of wrapping this up, specific to Michigan, what do you guys think is the future in this state? Because as I said to Matthew before we started, it very much continues to feel like Michigan and Colorado are leading this industry as to where we're going and where we're going to end up. And so I wonder, with your point of view, what do you think is going on in the state and where are we going?
From the point that we started in this to where it is now, it's come like a long way, from a compliance perspective and just seeing the amount of businesses that are out there that are in cannabis. And not just like one store, businesses, but actual like whole like enterprises, like they have 15 locations or they're vertically integrated or whatever. People are getting really organized and really, some of the projects that we see are truly like impressive. And, I think, kind of you nailed it there that Michigan and, Colorado are very ahead from, the way that they're doing it. And from a compliance perspective, I think, there is a lot that goes into it. But I think that's kind of why, Michigan or Colorado are kind of set apart from these other states. Like, Matt was talking about for, Oklahoma, so easy to get in, with you can just go in, you pay, a few $1,000s for your license and you're basically up and running, but that's not, I think for the sake of the industry, I don't think that's a sustainable way to go about it. And I think eventually, once it does become federally, legal and, which, I think will happen at some point. I don't think it's going to be the next 2 or 3 years, but maybe the next, 4, 5, 10, something like that. But I think it's going to take the path of same thing as like alcohol, you need a license and you need, there's a place and time for it. Like if I show up at work and I'm having a margarita, people are still gonna look at me and be like, hey, what the hell are you doing?
Yes. Even as the partner. Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. So that whole thing with the, the stigma of cannabis, I think it'll still be there, but it'll be there the same way that alcohol has a stigma of you can't drink at, 11 a.m. or whatever at
Right.
work. So, but I think the way that Michigan is going from, just the industry and the growth and, how much impact it's had on, the state from a financial perspective, everything. I think Michigan is doing a great job, and I can see other states that take the rep route similar to where Michigan is, kind of try to, or I would hope that they would copy this model that we have.
Matthew, I want to throw it over to you because Andrew just said the word that I wanted to kind of end on is the stigma around the industry. You're sort of need to be in a green zone, and I don't want a dispensary in my neighborhood and that sort of thing. And as this gets more normalized, what is your sense on that stigma sort of dropping off?
I think the stigma has slowly already started to drop off. So my family, my parents are foreign, and so they're very against cannabis, and obviously, I'm in a partner, and our firm specializes in cannabis. So it's funny because they're very against me getting into the industry. Like, oh, it's a bad thing to do. And as time went on, they're kind of like accepting it. It's always not that big of a deal. It's going to become normalized. They've accepted the fact that over time, this is going to be a commodity like liquor. It's going to be treated the same way. And I think you're starting to see it. I think as long as it's federally illegal, there will be that stigma. And until the veil gets dropped, I think that's when people will become more comfortable with it. And Andrew kind of mentioned over time, I think that you see these larger enterprises and these, wealthier individuals that are getting into the space that have, these other investments and are into other businesses that are, I think, well reputable, getting into the space. And that's when I think that people are going to accept and say, okay, this makes more sense. And then you have the side of it that it's a medicine. People are looking at it as a medicine. It's recreational. And I just think over time that will become less of a stigma.
So last week there was a story that was out that the Wrigley family is getting into the cannabis beverage industry. And so my last question is, on that note, do you think that might be the path to normalization? So we go in reverse. So it'll be cannabis beverages to gummies to smoking. Like that might be the way this becomes federally normalized.
I saw that, that was a curveball for me too. And I think you're right. It's something along those lines. And I think it's more so the name that comes with it than necessarily the product. Kind of like Matt said, and you just said, if you see that, Wrigley or, these well-known companies and brands are investing themselves into cannabis, then it kind of gives a more sense of comfort, and it gets people more on okay, this is a normal product. It's not something bad. It's not something that should have a stigma. And I do, kind of like you said, I do think there's going to be a lot of different products that, ease people into the market. And then eventually there's, some of those will stay, some of those will go. But, I think you're going to see a lot of different products out on the market, whether they are like gummies or drinks or whatever they are, that are more available to people. And it'll, there's going to be some, they can test the water with things and, maybe, with some of the gummies and things, I can see it being like, them kind of peeling back on how they did with like Juuls and how they marketed it really hard and younger people were getting into it. So that's something I can see maybe get really popular and then maybe like come down. And, but like, only time will tell with these things. And, but I think the biggest driver to normalcy will be getting those bigger, more established brands in it and just having like an organized market out there versus, this market that, the people that think the stigma and, they look at the cannabis industry like, people are, selling drugs or whatever.
Sure.
Kind of like, but I think, having those, these bigger, more reputable brands will kind of brings like what the industry really is and, kind of take that stigma away slowly.
Andrew, Matthew from the DA Advisory Group, thank you so much for the time today. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Appreciate you having us on.
Thanks, Eric.
And there they go. A big thanks to Matthew and Andrew for joining us today on the podcast. And don't forget, March 11th, brought to you in part by the DA Advisory Group, our Cannabis Insights event, your chance to get a leg up, an inside track on what you need to know if you're opening, looking to invest, or get involved in the cannabis space in the state of Michigan. It's March 11th. You can sign up in the show notes. And until next time, I'm Eric Hultgren, and this is the Everything is Marketing podcast.